My name is Amanda McDaniel, 29 years old. At my younger sister's wedding last October, my parents introduced me to her in-laws with a smile and 5 words I'll never forget. Meet the family Embarrassment. She works at a grocery store. The Ashfords, Northern California tech money, wine investment portfolio, the kind of family that vets every connection, laughed politely. My mother's hand swept toward me like I was proof of something shameful. I didn't argue. I didn't correct them. I just smiled, turned, and walked toward the garden terrace. They didn't know I'd approved every detail of that wedding. The menu, the flowers, the wine list. Every choice they thought was Claire's. I'd signed off on weeks ago. They didn't know whose estate they were standing on. And 3 minutes later, when the event director's voice came through the speakers asking for the owner's approval, the entire ballroom went silent. That was the moment 185 people learned the truth. If your family ever froze you inside an old version of yourself, comment the city you're watching from. Let me take you back. Because this didn't start at my sister's wedding. It started when I was 8 years old. The pattern began early. I remember my 8th birthday. My parents took me to Olive Garden, just the 4 of us, breadsticks and a single-layer cake from the grocery store bakery. My mother said it was because I was low-key and wouldn't want to fuss. I believed her. I thought maybe I really was the kind of kid who didn't need celebration. 2 months later, Claire turned 8. 35 guests, a rented pony, a photographer who stayed for 3 hours. I helped serve cake. I remember standing in the corner of our backyard watching the other kids pet the pony, and my mother didn't even glance my way once. She was too busy posting photos of Claire in her birthday crown. That night, after everyone left, my mother told her book club friends on speakerphone, "Claire's our little star. Amanda's, well, she's the practical one." I was 8. I didn't know what practical meant, but I knew it wasn't good. I remember Christmas that year, too. Claire got a dollhouse, custom-made, 4 feet tall. It had working lights. I got a puzzle and a book. My father said, "You're a reader, Amanda. You don't need fancy toys." But I'd asked for the art set, the one with 72 colors, $29. I'd circled it in the catalog 3 times. It never came. By the time I was 16, the difference was undeniable. Claire wanted to do pageants. My parents wrote a check for $15,000. Custom gowns, coaching, travel to preliminaries for Miss Teen California. I wanted to go to debate camp. $200 for the week. I asked 3 times. My father said, "Debate doesn't lead anywhere, sweetheart. Claire's building a portfolio." I babysat for 8 weeks straight that summer. 6 different families, evenings and weekends. I earned the money myself. $215 total. Enough for camp plus gas money. I went to the state finals in Sacramento. I'd prepared for 6 weeks. My closing argument was on criminal justice reform. I remember standing at that podium, seeing the judges' faces shift when I hit my final point. I placed first. Out of 230 students. I called my parents from the auditorium lobby. My mother answered. "I won," I said. "First in state." There was a pause. Then she said, "That's wonderful, honey. Listen, we're at Claire's pageant in San Diego. She didn't place and she's pretty upset. We'll celebrate your thing when we get home, okay?" We never did. When I got home with my trophy, my mother glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds. Then she said, "That's nice, honey. Help me unload Claire's suitcase from the car." The trophy sat in my room for 2 years. They never asked to see it, never mentioned it to anyone. But Claire's pageant photos? Those went on the mantle. I was 19 when the real break happened. I got into UC Berkeley, economics major, full acceptance letter. I was so proud. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table and told me they wanted me to go to the state school where Claire was enrolled. Marketing program, stay close, help build the family business. We didn't have a family business. I said I was going to Berkeley. My mother's face went cold. She said, "If you're so smart, figure it out yourself." They cut me off. tuition, housing, everything. I took out $42,000 in student loans. I worked at the campus library for $9 an hour. I catered events on weekends, serving champagne at weddings for people who didn't see me. By junior year, I was working 25 hours a week at Trader Joe's just to cover rent and food. I remember the exhaustion. Classes until 3, work until 10, homework until 2 in the morning. I'd fall asleep at my desk sometimes, forehead on my economics textbook. But I kept my GPA at 3.8. I graduated cum laude. And when I walked across that stage, my parents weren't there. They were helping Claire move into her first apartment, the one they'd paid the deposit on. $1,500 they didn't have for my textbooks, but had for her furniture. My mother told their friends I'd dropped out to work retail. I didn't drop out. I graduated with honors. But the truth didn't matter to them. The story they wanted to tell mattered. For the next 10 years, I became frozen in their narrative. I was 22, 23, 24, working part-time at Trader Joe's while I built a consulting practice on the side. I was earning $68,000 a year combined, but my family only saw the uniform. My father would introduce me to his colleagues and say, "This is Amanda, our daughter, still figuring things out, works at a grocery store right now." I'd stand there, silent, watching him reduce me to a checkout lane. I quit Trader Joe's when I was 25, started consulting full-time, but even then, years later, my parents would still say, "Amanda works in retail." Like I was frozen there forever. At family dinners, my mother would tell stories about Claire's job in marketing, Claire's new apartment, Claire's social media following, 12,000 followers, lifestyle influencer. My mother beamed every time she said it. No one ever asked what I did. When I was 28, I called my mother on her birthday. We talked for 11 minutes. At the end, she said, "Thank you, honey. When are you going to get a real job?" I'd just closed a deal to purchase my second property. They didn't hate my failure. They needed me to stay frozen in it. Because if I succeeded, their story about Claire being the golden child would fall apart. So I stopped telling them anything. And I built something they couldn't see. When I was 24, I started in hospitality consulting. Not the glamorous side, not event planning or coordination. I worked on the business side, operations, profit margins, guest experience optimization, real estate potential. I had a mentor, Daniel Webb. He ran a consulting firm in Sonoma and saw something in me that my family never did. I met him at an industry conference. I'd asked a question during a panel about revenue per available room, something most people in the audience didn't understand. Afterward, he pulled me aside. "You don't see decor, do you?" he said. I didn't know what he meant. "Most people in this industry see aesthetics," he continued. "Pretty tablecloths, flower arrangements. You see bones, you see cash flow. That's rare." He hired me as a consultant 2 weeks later, $8,000 for a 6-week project at a small inn in Sonoma. 12 rooms, beautiful property, hemorrhaging money. I found the problems in 3 days. Their pricing was wrong. Their staffing model was inefficient. They were spending $45,000 a year on services they didn't need. I gave them a 30-page report, restructured their operations. 6 months later, their profit margin had doubled. Daniel called me. "I'm getting calls about you. People want to know who did the turnaround." That's how it started. Word spread. I started getting more clients, small venues, bed and breakfasts, event spaces that were bleeding money and didn't know why. I worked nights, weekends. I'd sit in hotel lobbies with my laptop, analyzing spreadsheets until 2 in the morning. I loved it. For the first time in my life, I was being seen for what I could do, not what I wasn't. By the time I was 26, I had enough savings to invest. I'd been watching the market for 2 years, waiting for the right opportunity. I found it in March. A distressed property in Sonoma. A 12-room inn that hadn't been updated since the 90s. The owners were desperate. Divorce. Bankruptcy filing in 60 days. The asking price was $380,000. I had $76,000 in savings. Everything I'd earned. Every dollar I hadn't spent on rent or food or anything that wasn't essential. I went to the bank. A commercial property loan. The loan officer looked at me like I was delusional. "You're 26, he said. "And you want a commercial property loan for $300,000? I slid a folder across his desk. "I have a 3-year projection in comps. Read it." He read it. I got the loan. The day I closed, I drove to the property alone. It was raining. March in Sonoma. Cold and gray. The inn looked worse than the photos. Peeling paint. Cracked walkway. A broken sign that said vacancy in faded red letters. I stood in the parking lot with the keys in my hand and thought, what have I done? I'd just taken on $300,000 in debt. If this failed, I'd lose everything. I unlocked the front door. The lobby smelled like mildew and old carpet. There was water damage on the ceiling. The furniture was from 1987. But I could see it. I could see what it would become. I spent the next 14 months renovating. I did some of the work myself. Painted, stripped wallpaper, refinished the front desk. I hired contractors for the big things: plumbing, electrical, roof. I worked 70-hour weeks, consulting during the day, renovation at night. There were moments I thought I wouldn't make it. A pipe burst in November. Cost me $12,000 I didn't have. I put it on a credit card and didn't sleep for 3 days. But I finished. In May, I reopened. New name, new branding, new photos. The first booking came in that week. Then another. Then another. Within 6 months, I was at 85% occupancy. The revenue projections I'd shown the bank? I beat them by 30%. 14 months after I bought it, I sold it for $570,000. After paying off the loan, I walked away with $190,000 in profit. I was 27 years old, and I'd just proved to myself that I could do this. My family didn't know. I never told them. Because I knew what they'd say. They'd find a way to minimize it, to make it smaller, to keep me in the box they'd built. So I kept building in silence. In April of 2024, I made the biggest move of my career. I found Silver Lake Estate, 200 acres in Napa Valley, a historic property with an 1890s Victorian mansion, a modern event pavilion, and 40 acres of functional vineyard. It had been a struggling venue for years. Dated, poor management, they were losing money. The asking price was $8.5 million. I didn't have that kind of cash, but I had credibility, I had a track record, and I had partners who believed in me. I structured a deal through a holding company, Meridian Hospitality Partners, LLC. I took 73% ownership. 2 silent partners took the rest. My down payment was $2.1 million. Every dollar I'd earned, reinvested, saved, plus the investment from my partners. The day we closed, I drove to Silver Lake alone. It was late afternoon. April in Napa. The light was golden across the vineyard. I walked through the main house. The floors creaked. The wallpaper was peeling. There were cracks in the plaster. But the bones were good. The structure was solid. I stood in what would become the bridal suite and looked out at 200 acres of land that was now mine. I was terrified. I just signed documents for $8.5 million. If this failed, I wouldn't just lose money. I'd lose everything I'd built. I didn't sleep for 3 nights, but I got to work. By May, I'd hired an event director named Thomas Hale, experienced, professional, someone who understood what I was building. He'd worked at high-end venues in Sonoma for 15 years. When I told him my vision, he said, "This is ambitious, but if anyone can do it, it's you." I poured $3.2 million into renovations, updated the pavilion with climate control and acoustic panels, modernized the kitchen to handle catering for 250 guests, upgraded the guest suites, new linens, new furniture, bathrooms gutted and rebuilt, refined the landscaping, installed state-of-the-art lighting systems that could shift from ceremony to reception seamlessly. Every decision went through me. Thomas would send options. I'd approve or adjust. We worked 16-hour days that summer. I remember the first time I walked through the completed pavilion. It was September. The contractors had just finished. The chandelier was hung, custom piece 15 feet wide. The floors gleamed. The windows overlooked the vineyard. Thomas stood next to me. "It's beautiful." I nodded. I couldn't speak. Because this was mine. I'd built this. We weren't just another winery venue. We became a luxury estate experience. Museum-quality service, premium pricing, curated everything. Within 6 months, we'd gone from $22,000 events to $45,000 events. Some went as high as $85,000. In our first full year, we booked 38 weddings. Revenue projections for 2025 hit $2.8 million. By early 2026, Silver Lake alone was valued at $14 million. My total portfolio, Silver Lake plus 2 smaller venues I still owned, was worth $28 million. I employed 45 people full-time, 80 more seasonally. I had contracts, I had systems, I had a reputation in the industry. And my family had no idea, because I'd never needed them to know. In December of 2024, my sister Claire booked a wedding venue through her planner. She didn't deal with the property directly. The planner coordinated everything. I didn't know about it until September of 2025, when Thomas sent me an email. The subject line was simple: McDaniel Ashford Wedding, October 12, 2025. Owner approval required. I opened it at my desk. The message was short. "Hi Amanda, heads up. Bride's last name is McDaniel. Possible relation? Need your sign-off on the upgraded bar package for their October 12th event. Let me know. Thomas." I stared at the screen for 10 minutes. My younger sister, getting married at my venue, and she had no idea I owned it. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the vineyard. My mind was racing. Claire had booked Silver Lake, through a planner. She'd never mentioned it to me, never asked if I wanted to help, never told me she was getting married, period. I'd found out because my event director flagged a contract. I sat back down, read the email again. Then I called Thomas. "Approve everything," I said. "Don't mention my name to the client. Don't tell them I'm the owner." There was a pause. "You sure about this?" "I want to see what they do," I said. He didn't ask what I meant. He just said, "Understood." I hung up. For 3 weeks, I didn't sleep well. I'd lie awake thinking about it, wondering if I should tell them, wondering if this was a mistake. Part of me wanted to call Claire, tell her, watch her reaction. But another part of me, the part that had been invisible for 29 years, wanted to see what would happen if they didn't know. Would they include me? Would they treat me with respect? Would they, for once, ask about my life? Or would they do what they'd always done? I gave them a choice, a test they didn't know they were taking. Thomas checked in twice. "You still want me to keep this quiet?" "Yes," I said both times. I watched the booking details come through. The upgraded package, the wine selections, the menu choices, all approved by the planner, all charged to my sister's credit card. She was spending $78,000 at my venue, and she hadn't told me she was getting married. The wedding was set for October 12, 2025, a Saturday. 185 guests. Premium package. Claire never called to tell me she'd booked a venue. She didn't ask if I wanted to help with planning. She didn't invite me to vendor meetings or tastings. A week before the wedding, she sent me a text. "Hey, rehearsal dinner is just super intimate. Immediate fam plus wedding party. You understand, right?" Followed by a heart emoji. I stared at my phone, read it 3 times. Immediate family. I checked Instagram the next day. 45 people at the rehearsal dinner. I scrolled through the photos. Cousins, aunts, uncles, Claire's college roommate, Preston's groomsmen, all there. Immediate family. Except me. I screenshot the post, saved it to a folder on my phone labeled Receipts. 2 days before the wedding, Thomas sent me the final seating chart for approval. Standard procedure for any event at Silver Lake. The owner always reviews guest placement for logistical reasons: fire code, accessibility, service flow. I opened the file. Family tables were front and center. Tables 1 and 2, right near the dance floor. My parents, Claire, the groom's family, close relatives. I scrolled down. Table 14. My name was there. Amanda McDonald. 8 people I didn't know. Strangers. Table 14 was near the service corridor, the door the kitchen staff used to bring in supplies and take out trash. And my name was wrong. McDonald, not McDaniel. I felt my chest tighten, not with sadness, with clarity. They'd placed me as far from the family as possible, in the worst location in the room, and they couldn't even spell my name correctly. I called Thomas. He answered on the first ring. "I saw the seating chart," I said. "Yeah." His voice was careful. "I flagged it. Want me to fix it?" I looked at the screen again. Table 14, next to the trash corridor. "Leave it," I said. "I want to see where they put me." There was a pause. Then he said quietly, "I'm sorry, Amanda." "Don't be," I said. "This is exactly what I needed to know." I hung up. That afternoon, I went to Silver Lake. It was quiet. No events scheduled. I walked through the empty ballroom. 250 seats arranged in perfect rows. Tables set with linens and silverware, the chandelier casting soft light across the stone floors. Every detail in that room was a decision I'd made. Every vendor I'd vetted, every system I'd built. I'd chosen the color of the napkins, the height of the centerpieces, the angle of the lighting. And my family had placed me at table 14, near the trash corridor, with my name spelled wrong. I stood there for a long time, just breathing. They didn't just not know about my success, they actively refused to see me. I walked back to my office, sat down, opened my laptop. I didn't cancel the wedding. I didn't change anything. I just waited. The Ashford family arrived on October 11th. They checked into our guest suites. Douglas and Eleanor Ashford, Preston, the groom, Vanessa, his older sister. I watched from my office window as they walked the grounds. Eleanor stopped to admire the vineyard views. Douglas asked one of our staff about the property's history. I heard the staff member say, "It's privately held, sir. Ownership prefers to stay behind the scenes." Douglas nodded. He looked impressed. These were serious people. Douglas had sold a tech startup in 1998 for $180 million. He'd invested in Napa vineyards and real estate ever since. Eleanor sat on the boards of 3 nonprofits. Vanessa was a venture capital partner. They valued education, merit, transparency, reputation. And my parents were about to lie to them about me. The wedding day came. I arrived at Silver Lake at 6 in the morning. I always did. Thomas met me in the kitchen. We did our final walkthrough, checked the floral arrangements, reviewed the service timeline, confirmed the wine pairings. By 8, everything was ready. I went home, changed into a simple black silk dress. The row. Understated, elegant. Pearl stud earrings, my grandmother's. The only jewelry she'd left me. My parents had given Claire everything else. Black Louboutin pumps, hair in a low bun, minimal makeup, no flash, no statement. Just quiet presence. I looked at myself in the mirror, took a breath. This was it. I came back at 4:30. The ceremony started at 5. I sat in the last row. Not the family section. Rows 1 through 3 were reserved for immediate family. I was in row 12, behind people I'd never met. The officiant began. The bride's parents, who have supported her every step of this journey. The camera panned to my parents. They smiled, beaming with pride. No mention of me. I didn't cry, I just watched. Claire walked down the aisle in a gown I knew cost $18,000. My parents had paid for it. I knew because Claire had posted about it on Instagram. So grateful to my amazing parents for making my dream dress a reality. She looked beautiful, and I was happy for her. I really was. But I also knew I was standing in my own estate, watching my family treat me like I didn't exist. The ceremony lasted 22 minutes, then cocktail hour began. The foyer and terrace filled with guests, champagne, hors d'oeuvres, the late afternoon light streaming through the windows. Laughter everywhere. I stood near the terrace doors, away from the family clusters. I watched my parents move through the crowd, introducing Claire to people, shaking hands, posing for photos. One of our head servers, James, approached with a tray. He'd been with Silver Lake since we opened. Good employee, discreet. He said quietly, "Miss McDaniel champagne?" I took a glass. "Thank you, James." He nodded and moved on. Professional. No one else heard. I sipped the champagne. Veuve Clicquot. I'd selected it myself for the premium bar package. I watched my parents across the room. They were introducing Claire to the Ashfords, warm, effusive, proud. My mother's hand on Claire's shoulder. My father laughing at something Douglas said. Vanessa Ashford glanced my way once. Curious. We hadn't been introduced yet. She was sharp. I could tell. The way she observed the room, the way she listened. Then my mother saw me. She said something to my father. They both looked over. My father nodded. They started walking toward me. The Ashfords followed. Douglas, Eleanor, Vanessa. My heart was beating hard, but my face stayed calm. My mother's smile was too bright, the kind of smile that meant performance, the kind she used when she wanted to look good in front of people who mattered. She reached me first. "Oh, Douglas, Eleanor," she said, her hand sweeping toward me like I was an exhibit. "Let me introduce our other daughter, Amanda." She paused. Let the words settle. Then she laughed. Light, casual, like she was telling a joke. "She's the family embarrassment, really." The words hit like a slap. Douglas and Eleanor's smiles froze. Polite, uncomfortable. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. My mother kept going. "She works at a grocery store, still trying to find her footing after all these years." My father chuckled, added his line. "We keep hoping she'll grow out of it, but you know how it is. Some kids just take longer." I felt the humiliation wash over me. Public, deliberate, in front of strangers, but underneath it, I felt something else. Clarity. This was who they were. This was what they needed me to be. I stood there for 3 seconds, silent. Let the humiliation sit in the air between us. Eleanor's smile had completely disappeared. Douglas looked uncomfortable. Vanessa was watching me, not with pity, with assessment. Then I smiled, small, controlled. "Enjoy the evening," I said. I turned and walked toward the garden terrace. Not fast, not dramatic, just done. Behind me I heard Eleanor say something quiet to Douglas. I didn't catch the words, but her tone was cold. I passed through the kitchen corridor on my way out. The prep kitchen was full of my staff. They were plating the first course, seared scallops with butternut squash puree, a dish I'd approved 3 weeks ago. Marcus, my sous chef, looked up. He'd worked in Michelin-starred restaurants before I hired him. He was the best in Napa. "Ms. McDaniel," he said. "Everything good?" "Perfect, Marcus," I said. "Service looks excellent." He nodded and went back to work. I stepped onto the terrace. Empty. Quiet. The sun was setting over the vineyard. Golden light across 200 acres. 200 acres I owned. I stood there and breathed. Let the humiliation settle. Let the anger come and go. They thought I stocked shelves. They had no idea. If you've ever been introduced like your worst year was your whole identity, comment, "I remember." Back inside, the Ashfords were starting to doubt. Vanessa pulled Preston aside. I didn't hear it, but Thomas was nearby. He told me later. Vanessa's voice was sharp. "That was weird. Why did your in-laws introduce their daughter like that?" Preston was defensive. "I don't know, family dynamics, I guess. Claire said Amanda's not really involved much." Vanessa's voice dropped lower. "Not involved? Or not wanted?" Preston didn't answer. Eleanor mentioned it to Douglas, too. They were standing near the bar. Thomas heard her say, "That felt cruel." Douglas said, "Let's observe. Something's off." My parents noticed the Ashfords' coolness. I saw it from the terrace. My mother's smile got brighter, more forced. She started complimenting Claire louder, talking about the wedding planning, how perfect everything was. But the Ashfords weren't buying it. At 6:30, guests moved into the ballroom for dinner. I walked back inside. The room had transformed, candles lit, music playing softly, the chandelier glowing. I found my seat at table 14. The service corridor door was 10 feet away. I could hear the kitchen staff moving back and forth. Voices. The clatter of dishes. The woman next to me smiled. Mid-50s. Someone's aunt, probably. "Have you been here before? This place is stunning." "Once or twice," I said. She gestured around. "I can't imagine what it costs to book this venue. Must be a fortune." I just smiled. Dinner began. 4 courses, wine pairings. Every dish was something I'd approved. Seared scallops, beef tenderloin with truffle butter, roasted root vegetables, lemon panna cotta for dessert. I ate in silence, watched the room, my room. The family tables were animated, laughing, toasting. My parents were holding court, telling stories, being charming. At table 14, I was invisible. I looked at my name card. Amanda McDonald. Wrong name, wrong table, wrong life according to them. But I knew something they didn't. Every detail in this room was mine. The menu they were eating, the wine they were drinking, the lights, the flowers, the music, the staff moving efficiently through service, the systems that made it all work seamlessly. They were dining inside my empire, and they had no idea. At 6:42, I saw movement near the service bar. Our head sommelier was talking into his radio. His face looked stressed. Thomas appeared a moment later. They spoke quickly. I couldn't hear them from table 14, but I knew what was happening. We'd run out of the reserve Cabernet for tables 6 through 9. A warehouse miscommunication. The substitute was our library vintage. $850 per bottle instead of $320. Contract policy was clear. Any substitution over $200 per bottle required owner approval. I watched Thomas pull out his phone. Try to call me. My phone was in my clutch. On silent. He waited. Tried again. Nothing. He looked around the room. Then he looked at me. Our eyes met across the ballroom. I gave him a small nod. He understood. He had no choice. At 6:45, Thomas walked to the microphone at the front of the ballroom. The room was loud, conversations overlapping, music playing, silverware clinking on china. He tapped the microphone twice. The sound echoed. Conversations began to quiet. People looked up. He spoke clearly, professionally. His voice carried across the room. "Pardon the interruption, everyone. Ms. McDaniel, if you're available, we need ownership approval on a wine substitution matter. Could you meet me near the service bar?" The ballroom went silent. 185 guests, 15 staff, 200 people stopped moving. The music stopped. Everyone looked around, searching for Ms. McDaniel. My parents looked confused. They glanced at each other. Who was Ms. McDaniel? Claire's face was blank, lost. Douglas Ashford's head turned, scanning the room. I stood up from table 14. Every eye in the room turned to me. I could feel it. The weight of 200 gazes. The question in the air. I walked across the ballroom, 35 steps from table 14 to the service bar. 18 seconds that felt like minutes. My posture was straight. My face was calm. I didn't hurry, didn't look down. As I passed table 7, I saw Douglas lean forward, watching. As I passed table 2, I saw my mother's face. Confusion shifting to something else. Recognition, maybe. Fear. I saw staff members snap to attention. Marcus straightened in the kitchen doorway. James stepped aside near the bar. They knew who I was. They'd always known. Guests started whispering. Wait, who is that? I thought she was just a guest. McDaniel. That's the bride's last name. Is she related? She was sitting way in the back. I reached the service bar. Thomas was waiting. He handed me an iPad. His voice was professional, but his eyes held something else. Respect. Maybe relief. He said, loud enough for the closest 50 people to hear. Miss McDaniel, apologies for pulling you away. We need your authorization to substitute the Reserve Cabernet with our 2018 library selection for tables 6 through 9. It's a $530 per bottle variance. I took the iPad, read the substitution request. 15 seconds. The room stayed silent, waiting. I signed with my finger. The signature appeared on screen. Amanda McDaniel, owner authorization. Approved, I said. My voice was steady, clear. Use the library vintage. Thank you, Thomas said. I'll have the sommelier proceed. He took the iPad back. The room was still silent. And then Douglas Ashford stood up. He was at table 7, right in the center of the family section. His chair scraped against the floor. The sound was loud in the silence. His voice carried, confusion and realization mixing together. Wait. He looked directly at me. Ms. McDaniel, you're the owner of Silver Lake Estate? 200 people held their breath. I turned to face him, met his eyes. Majority owner, yes, I said, through Meridian Hospitality Partners. The silence somehow deepened. Eleanor Ashford's hand went to her mouth. Her eyes were wide. Preston looked frozen. His face had gone pale. Vanessa smiled. Just a little, like pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking together. And my mother stood there like a statue. Her champagne glass halfway to her lips, stopped mid-motion. My father's face drained of color. White. Shocked. Eleanor said it quietly, but in the silence everyone heard. Oh my God. Her voice was barely a whisper. They told us she works at a grocery store. No one moved. No one spoke. Claire's face crumpled. She looked at me, then at our parents, then back at me. Tears started forming. Preston reached for her hand, but he looked shaken too. My father finally found his voice. Amanda, we can explain. I held up one hand. Calm, firm, final. Please sit down, I said. Enjoy your dinner. I turned and walked back to table 14. They let me go. Every step back, I felt eyes on me. But I didn't look at anyone. I just walked. Steady. Calm. I reached table 14, sat down. The woman next to me was staring. You own this place? I picked up my wine glass. I do. She didn't know what to say. The ballroom stayed silent for 10 more seconds. Then, slowly, conversations started again. Muted. Stunned. Whispered. Dinner service continued, but the energy had shifted. Fractured. At my parents' table, they sat frozen. My mother's hands were shaking. My father kept looking at me, then looking away. At table 7, Douglas was speaking quietly to Eleanor. She nodded. Her face was hard. Vanessa pulled out her phone, started typing. Preston and Claire sat at the head table, barely touching their food. At 7 o'clock, the library Cabernet was served to tables 6 through 9. The sommelier poured carefully. $850 per bottle. 12 bottles total. Douglas Ashford tasted it, swirled it, held it to the light. He looked at Eleanor. They both knew wine. They knew quality. They knew cost. Douglas said quietly to Eleanor, but I heard it later from Thomas, who was nearby. She just made a $10,000 decision in 15 seconds. Do you understand what that means? Eleanor nodded slowly. She's not just the owner. She runs this place. Every sip they took was my decision. Every bite on their plate was from my menu. Every candle, every flower, every note of music. Mine. They were eating inside an empire I'd built. While my family had called me an embarrassment, At 7:50, Douglas stood up again. He walked over to my parents' table. His posture was stiff, formal. Eleanor and Vanessa followed. Their faces were cold. I couldn't hear everything from table 14, but Thomas was stationed near the family tables. He told me later, word for word. Douglas's voice was low, controlled, but intense. You told us your daughter works at a grocery store. You called her an embarrassment. She owns this estate. Do you understand what you've done? My father tried to speak. His voice was weak. We didn't know she... Douglas cut him off. You didn't know? His voice got harder. Or you didn't care to know, which is worse. My mother tried to smooth it over, her social smile coming back. Douglas, it was a joke. We were just... Eleanor's voice was ice, sharp, final. That wasn't a joke. That was cruelty. Vanessa leaned in. Her voice was quiet but clear. We need to talk to Preston. Now. The three Ashfords walked away from the family table, turned their backs, deliberately. It was the first time all night they'd physically separated from the bride's family. Other guests noticed, heads turned, more whispers. At 8:05, Preston stood up. He took Claire's hand. We need to talk. Outside. Claire's face was streaked with tears. Preston, I didn't know. Outside, he said again, not angry, just firm. They walked to the terrace. Vanessa followed them, the same terrace where I'd stood 2 hours earlier, where I'd breathed through the humiliation. I didn't hear that conversation. But Claire came back inside 15 minutes later with red eyes and ruined makeup. Preston's arm was around her, but his face was tight, stressed. Vanessa came back separately. She walked directly to Douglas and Eleanor, spoke quietly. They all nodded. At 8:20, Eleanor Ashford approached my table. Douglas came with her. The conversations around table 14 stopped, everyone watching. Eleanor's face was kind, genuine. Her eyes held something I'd never seen from my own mother. Respect. Amanda, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. We had no idea. Your family completely misrepresented you. I looked up at her, set down my wine glass. You don't owe me anything, I said. You were given information. It wasn't your fault. Douglas spoke. His voice was warm now, different from how he'd sounded with my parents. For what it's worth, this estate is extraordinary. What you've built here is remarkable. Truly remarkable. Thank you, I said. I appreciate that. Eleanor hesitated. If there's anything we can do... I shook my head gently. Just enjoy the rest of the evening. It's Claire's day. She nodded, touched my shoulder briefly. Then they walked away. And when they did, they looked at me differently. Not with pity, not with awkwardness, with respect. The kind I'd never gotten from my own family. At 8:35, my parents tried to approach me. I was standing near the service bar, checking with Thomas about dessert service, making sure timing was on track. My father's voice came from behind me, tentative. Amanda, sweetheart, we need to talk. I didn't turn around. Not now. My mother tried. Her voice had that pleading edge. We didn't mean for it to come out like that. I turned, slowly, looked at them both. My voice was quiet, but every word was clear. You meant every word. You've been saying it for 10 years. The only difference is now people know you were lying. My father tried again, reaching. We can fix this. There's nothing to fix, I said. Just let me work. I turned back to Thomas. Dismissed them. My parents stood there for 5 seconds, uncertain, lost. Then they walked away. It was the first time in my life I'd ended a conversation with them, the first time I'd had the last word. The reception continued, dancing, toasts, cake cutting, but the energy was wrong, flat, uncomfortable. The wedding that was supposed to be perfect was cracking apart. By 9, some of the Ashford extended family started leaving, not dramatically, just quietly slipping out. Cousins, aunts, uncles. The planned end time was 1 in the morning, open bar until midnight, dancing until the end. By 11:15, 40% of the Ashford side was gone. 23 people. Their chairs empty. One of Preston's cousins stopped by his table on the way out, leaned down, said something quiet. Thomas heard it, told me later. Beautiful wedding. But your in-laws. We'll talk later. Preston just nodded, his jaw tight. Claire noticed the exodus. She spent 15 minutes crying in the bathroom. Her makeup ruined. One of her bridesmaids went to check on her. Preston was grim, standing by the bar, not drinking, just staring at nothing. I didn't join the family goodbyes. I stayed with my staff, supervised the breakdown, made sure everything was being handled properly. The wedding ended at 12:30, an hour and a half early. Not with joy, not with celebration, with questions and fractures. The next day, October 13th, the posts started. 3 guests had been there, watching, recording, not video, just mental notes, impressions, the kind of story that was too good not to share. One post went up on Instagram that afternoon. No names, no tags, but the details were clear enough. Just witness the wildest wedding reveal. Bride's family called the sister family embarrassment, works at grocery store, in front of in-laws. Plot twist. Sister owns the entire venue, multi-million-dollar estate. I can't even process this. It got shared. Fast. Someone else posted on Facebook. Attended a Napa wedding yesterday. Family drama like I've never seen. Parents humiliated one daughter publicly. Turned out she owns the whole property. The in-laws were pissed. A third post on Twitter. Wedding tea. Watched a family destroy their own daughter's reputation in front of 200 people, only to find out said daughter is a literal millionaire property owner. The silence in that room was deafening. Within 48 hours, the combined reach was 45,000 views, 600 comments, most of them supportive of me, angry at my parents. The hashtag started trending locally in Napa Valley, hashtag Silver Lake Wedding Drama. People who'd been there started chiming in. I was there. It was wild. The looks on the parents' faces. That woman handled it with so much class. Claire turned off comments on her Instagram, then made her account private. Preston's family group chat, according to Vanessa later, went into full damage control mode. The story spread. Not because I told it, not because I wanted revenge, because the truth told itself. 5 days later, on October 17th, Preston's family attorney sent an email to Preston's personal attorney. The email was formal, legal language, but the message was clear. Given recent revelations regarding misrepresentation of family circumstances and character concerns, the Ashford family requests prenuptial agreement modification to include full financial disclosure of both parties' families and a character integrity clause with clearly defined honesty standards. The original prenup had been standard, asset protection, clean boundaries. Now the Ashfords wanted amendments, background verification, financial disclosure, honesty triggers that could impact the marriage contract. Preston was caught between Claire and his family, between his new wife and the people who'd raised him. Claire was devastated. This wasn't how a marriage was supposed to start. They hadn't even gone on their honeymoon yet. On October 19th, they flew to Bora Bora. 12 days planned. Overwater bungalow. Private beach. The honeymoon Claire had been planning for months. On October 23rd, 4 days in, Eleanor called Preston. "We need you home." Preston tried to argue. "Mom, we're on our honeymoon." Eleanor's voice was firm, not angry, just resolute. "And we're dealing with a PR crisis and a contract issue because of your in-laws. Come home. We'll pay for you to go back later." Preston looked at Claire. She was crying, again. "We'll be home tomorrow," he said. They flew back on October 25th. 6 days into a 12-day trip. The overwater bungalow sat empty. Claire blamed my parents, not me. She told Preston that on the flight home. She knew the truth. She'd always known, maybe, that they treated me differently. She just hadn't wanted to see how bad it was. But the marriage had started with cracks. visible fractures that wouldn't be easy to repair. For 3 weeks after the wedding, my parents tried to reach me. Texts, voicemails, emails, calls I didn't answer. My mother's texts got more desperate. "Amanda, please, we need to talk. We know we made mistakes. We're your parents." My father left a voicemail. "Sweetheart, this has gotten out of hand. We never meant to hurt you. Can we just sit down, please?" I didn't respond to any of it. Finally, on November 2nd, 3 weeks after the wedding, I agreed to meet them. Not at Silver Lake, not at their house, not anywhere that held meaning. Neutral ground, Blue Bottle Coffee in downtown Napa. 2 in the afternoon on a Saturday. I arrived exactly on time. They were already sitting at a corner table, 2 coffees in front of them, untouched. They looked older, tired. My mother's makeup couldn't hide the circles under her eyes. My father's shoulders were slumped. I sat down, didn't order anything, didn't smile. My father started. His voice was careful. "We didn't mean it the way it sounded." I cut him off, clean. "You called me an embarrassment, to my face, in front of strangers." My mother leaned forward, reaching for damage control. "It was meant to be lighthearted. We were just—" "For 10 years, I said, my voice level. "You've told people I work retail. I haven't touched a cash register since I was 24. You froze me there. You needed me there. Because if I succeeded, your story about Claire didn't work anymore." My father's voice rose slightly, defensive. "That's not fair." "What's not fair," I said, "is that you never asked. Not once in 8 years did you ask what I actually do. Not once did you want to know." They both went quiet. The coffee shop noise filled the silence. Espresso machine hissing, conversations at other tables, normal life happening around us. I let the silence sit, let them feel it. Then I spoke again, slowly, each word deliberate. "I'm not asking you to fix this. I'm telling you what needs to change." I listed 3 rules, 3 boundaries. 1. Don't introduce me. Don't speak for me. Don't explain me to anyone. If someone asks about me, you say I'm private. That's it. 2. Don't use my name for social leverage. Don't talk about me to make yourselves look better or worse or anything. I'm not part of your narrative anymore. 3. No family events at any Silver Lake properties. Ever. You're not welcome there in any capacity. I paused. Let it sink in. "I'm not cutting contact, but I'm done being your version of me. I'm done being the narrative you needed." My mother's voice was strained, almost breaking. "That's extreme, Amanda." "That's reality," I said. My father tried one more time, his voice smaller now. "We're still your parents, and I'm still your daughter," I said. "Just not the version you made up." I stood. They didn't. My mother's voice called after me, desperate now. "Amanda, wait!" I stopped at the door, turned back one last time. "I've waited 29 years, I said. "I'm done waiting." I walked out. I drove back to Silver Lake. The November afternoon was clear, cold, beautiful. I didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't fall apart. I just felt free. That evening I walked the 200 acres alone. Through the vineyard, the vines bare now in late fall. Past the pavilion, empty and quiet. Around the estate house, the Victorian mansion I'd restored. I stood in the center of the property. The sun was setting, orange and pink across the valley. I thought about the girl I'd been, 8 years old, helping serve cake at her sister's birthday party. 16, babysitting all summer to pay for debate camp. 19, working 3 jobs to get through Berkeley. 26, standing in a run-down inn with $76,000 and a dream. 29, standing on 200 acres that were mine. I didn't feel invisible anymore. I felt seen. By myself. And that was enough. 2 weeks later, Douglas Ashford reached out. Not through Claire, not through my parents, not through any family channel, through professional channels, a direct email to my business address. The email was respectful, genuine. Ms. McDaniel, I hope this finds you well. Eleanor and I were impressed by what you've built at Silver Lake. We're exploring investment opportunities in the Napa hospitality sector and would value your perspective. Would you be open to a brief conversation? No pressure or obligation, just professional interest. Best regards, Douglas Ashford. I read it twice, then a third time. They weren't approaching me as Claire's sister, as the family embarrassment, as someone who needed pity. They were approaching me as a business owner, a peer. I replied the next day. Professional, courteous, clear. Douglas, thank you for reaching out. I appreciate the interest, but at this time I'm keeping Meridian's ownership structure private and closed to new investment. I wish you and your family all the best. Respectfully, Amanda McDaniel. His response came within an hour. Completely understood. The offer stands if circumstances change. You've built something truly special. Best, Douglas. Mutual respect. No strings, no conditions. I didn't need their investment. I didn't need their validation. But it meant something that they saw me. Really saw me. On November 20th, Claire texted me. It was the first time since the wedding, 6 weeks of silence. The message was long, raw. Amanda, I know I don't deserve a reply. I probably don't deserve your time at all, but I need you to know something. I didn't know. About Silver Lake, about how bad they treated you, about any of it. I was blind. I was the golden child, and I never questioned why. I never asked what that cost you. I'm sorry. Not for them. For me. For not seeing you. For not asking. For being part of a system that hurt you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know. Claire. I read it 3 times, sat with it for 2 days. Then I wrote back. Short. Honest. I know you didn't know. That's part of the problem. Nobody asked. Nobody wanted to know. I don't hate you, Claire, but I can't be your sister the way you might want right now. Take care of yourself. Not warm, not hostile, just honest. The door wasn't slammed shut, just left ajar, cracked open enough for air, but not enough for them to walk back through like nothing happened. Because Claire wasn't my enemy. She never had been. She was just the golden child in a system I'd never fit. And that system had broken us both in different ways. If you had to choose, would you forgive them? Or set a boundary? Comment one word: forgive or boundary. I didn't become visible that night at Silver Lake. I had been visible all along. Building, earning, owning, creating something real and lasting and mine. They just needed me small enough not to notice, small enough to fit the story they wanted to tell, small enough to make Claire shine brighter. Now they know. The Ashfords know. The 185 guests know. The 45,000 people who saw those posts know. And I don't need them to acknowledge it. I don't need them to apologize or change or finally see me the way I deserve to be seen, because I already know who I am. I'm Amanda McDaniel, 29 years old, owner of Silver Lake Estate and 6 other properties across Northern California, builder of a $28 million hospitality portfolio, employer of 125 people, daughter of parents who couldn't see past their own story, sister to a woman who's learning to see clearly for the first time, and owner of every choice I make from here forward. I didn't need their approval to build my empire, and I don't need it now.